I guess you gotta look at it as the IBF, the WBC hasn't been, playing around. Like if you don't, like it's either going to go to a purse bid, you're going to fight the person they want you to fight, or you're going to vacate your title. So right now we see that former now, IBF 168-pound super middleweight champion called FROCH has vacated his title. He had to vacate his title because the IBF gave him until January the 31st, 2015 to strike out a deal with James DeGALE. James DeGALE right now, what is James DeGALE? What is he, 21-1 with 14 KOs? I forgot. I know I'm supposed to know. I forgot. But long story short, James DeGALE was called FROCH's mandatory. James DeGALE beat George Groves. Cole FROCH fought George Groves twice. Cole FROCH didn't like the fact that he had to fight a mandatory in George Groves twice and then couldn't pick the next fight that he wanted to fight. So the IBF said, well, listen, you got to fight James DeGALE. Give up your title. James DeGALE was on his top. Now James DeGALE is going to be fighting his next fight, or his next fight should be for that vacated IBF title. Now, here's how the IBF landscape is right now. Here's the top four guys. You got James DeGALE. Now remember, Cole FROCH is gone. You got James DeGALE, Al Heyman's Andre DiRRELL. You got Gilberto Ramirez. Remember, he's that big top-ranked guy. He didn't look too good in his last fight. And then you got George Groves. So ain't that crazy that, right? You got Andre DiRRELL, who fought Cole FROCH over in the UK. It's all about if he would go back or not to the UK. Him, in my opinion, I'm an American. Him, in my opinion, James DeGALE and Andre DiRRELL would be a big fight over there because of the passion of the UK fans. Now, that's hard to explain, but what I'm saying is, if you bring James DeGALE over here to the United States, that fight's not going to do diddly. So, if you look at, well, what about Andre DiRRELL, George Groves? Why would George Groves fight Andre DiRRELL when he's the #1 contender for Anthony DiRRELL in a fight that he can win? Now, I'm not saying he will win. I'm saying he has a better chance of beating Anthony DiRRELL than Andre DiRRELL, if he was. So then you think to yourself, well, who's George Groves going to fight? Now we know he fought, what is his name? Rebras. I forgot his first name. Christopher Rebras. He fought him, didn't look good. Those same problems that showed up with George Groves showed up again. He started slowing down later on in the fight. So when you look at the fact that he fought the mama's boy guy, the guy that always comes up with his mom. He fought him, and you're thinking, okay, well, why are you fighting this fight? That means you're still not ready for Anthony DiRRELL. So I'm thinking, I know you're probably thinking, like, what is this mumbo jumbo this American is talking? But I'm thinking to myself, well, Cole FROCH is out of the picture. George Groves and James DeGALE, that would be the perfect fight. Just like James DeGale versus Andre DiRRELL would be the perfect fight. Now, when it comes to George Groves George Groves versus James DeGALE, George Groves is A-side in that situation. Why? Is because 80,000 seats in his name, even though, he struggled, with tickets with the Christopher Rebras fight, and yes, I know, his name still, put him with the right fighter, is going to generate a lot. And plus, he's kind of annoying, and he's got like that annoying shit talking that he's got going on. But I guess what I'm trying to say is this. The boxing landscape is so vast, and me doing videos like this is hard because I think to myself, I got to treat all my videos like it's the first. So I think like, well, I got to talk about this, but then I got to talk about that, but then I got to talk about this. But you guys should know the landscape. George Groves is a very good fighter. I'm not hating on George Groves. He's a good fighter, but he has issues if the fight goes past 12. And if he can't knock you out, if he can't stop you early, there are issues. James DeGale is so much better, especially since he doesn't have the same injuries that he used to have before when he was getting knocked around by journeymen. So if you look at the fact that, yes, his last fight, Marco Antonio Parabon was his name, he didn't have a trainer and he was all out of shape and everything like that. Parabon still looked the same, was that same way when he almost beat Sakio Bika and became the WBC recognized champion. So when you look at what he did to Brendan Gonzalez, he beat the dog shit out of him. So I guess what I'm saying is this. I know James DeGale has like a question mark around him. But then I ask myself, well, George Groves already shown us that question mark is now exclamation point. You can be stopped and you can be put to sleep. So I'm thinking to myself, well, how does Andre DiRRELL factor into the situation? Andre DiRRELL can beat them both. But if someone had a better chance, it would be James DeGale, in my opinion. James DeGale is slightly faster than George Groves and the better boxer and able to adjust more from what we can see. Now, you can say that James DeGale never fought someone the quality of Cole FROCH before. I understand that. But what I'm saying is, from what we've been seeing from George Groves, it's just too, if there was a rematch between him and James DeGALE, I'm picking James DeGALE, maybe even by stoppage. So, as the situation develops, we don't know who's going to be fighting who right now. George Groves is going back and forth with Eddie Hearn on Twitter, about an offer, I guess, for a James DeGALE fight. That would be a big fight, and I'm guessing it would be for the IBF championship and maybe the IBF championship. And listen to me. What the WBC has been doing, the WBC, the IBF, and the WBA, what they've been doing is, if you look, they've been making their mandatories, and they've been working on making one champion, which is why people ask, how can Gennady Golovkin be the WBA champion and #1 contender for another belt somewhere else? If James DeGALE and George Groves, or it would be George Groves versus James DeGALE 2, were to happen, it would be for the IBF title and the #1 contender WBC, and the winner against Anthony DiRrell. Now, when you look at, what about Andre DiRrell? He's the #1 contender. Right now, he's got an issue on whether he would go and fight in the UK or not, where he would get more money. So I understand that that's a fight that has to happen. And, as you know, the IBF has been making their mandatories, but they still owe James DeGALE, him getting a fight, like an actual title shot, and then defending it once before he has to, fight a mandatory. But like I said, I know it's kind of confusing. I'm T-Street Controversy, and as the story develops, I'm waiting for one more video to come out, because it's kind of like we knew that FROCH was going to vacate his title, but as far as this situation with George Groves and James DeGALE, really close to fighting each other, or from what we're hearing, or either James DeGALE versus Andre DiRrell, there's some big fights out there. And honestly, if they were on pay-per-view, I'd buy them both. I'm T-Street Controversy. This is T-Street Controversy Live. I cover every single major fight live. As the story develops, I will be here. And I'm just waiting for some more news to come out. So basically, my next video on the subject will most likely be James DeGALE versus George Groves 2, James DeGALE versus Andre DiRrell, because it's now official that his next fight will be for the IBF title. T-Street Controversy on RealCombatMedia.com, T-Street Controversy on Twitter, T-Street Controversy on Instagram, T-Street Controversy on Facebook. Please subscribe.